Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Table Turners. We are the Jubilee Collective, and I'm Linda. We'll just all introduce ourselves very briefly. I'm Linda. I am a middle school teacher, also a writer and an activist. Next.
Rodney Lynch. I serve in the campus ministry capacity in the greater Lafayette area of Indiana.
I'm Jennifer Berry. I'm currently the pastor at New Paltz United Methodist Church. I am also a writer and an activist.
My name is Teresita, and I am a poet and activist, and I'm in Florida, and the locust started making a sound, so I apologize if that happens. I'm also the executive director of a faith-based non-for-profit.
I'm Michael Howard. I'm the Minister of Faith and Action for the Living Water Association in Northeast Ohio, and I'm also an activist.
All right. Thank you, everybody. So I wanted us all to come together today because there is so much going on right now in this country, and it's tearing us apart. It's tearing me apart, my spirit, my heart, and I wanted to create a space for us to be able to discuss this and to critically analyze it, because we're all theologians. Let me just say that, if I didn't mention that as well. All of us actually went to seminary together, just so the audience knows this, knows what our connection is. So I'm hoping that we can have a discussion, a theological discussion on the social justice issues that revolve around these current events, having to deal with Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the woman in Central Park, what was her name?
It's called
Amy Cooper.
Amy Cooper, yes. So,
Sean Reed is another name also.
Yes, Sean Reed, yes.
21-year-old veteran who was shot and killed by police in Indianapolis, which is an hour south of where I'm at. Quite frankly, just recently I've been hearing a lot about killings and things happening in Indianapolis this past month. One pregnant lady was ran over by a police car who was on the way to work. It was accidental, but just how does that happen? I have no idea.
Right.
And by the way, these are just some names that we have heard about that have gotten the news attention.
I think that's so important to highlight, because we get the privilege of, and I use that very loosely, of having images of these instances. But that is a privilege. That's a privilege. There's so much that goes unrecorded,
Right.
Since forever, that goes unrecorded, that goes undocumented, and that gets brushed under the rug. And I think it's important for us to make that mark that we only know of this now because of technology. That doesn't mean it's
Right.
new.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that it's unique or isolated incidents.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's
important.
And just so you know, so the last statistic I heard, it's like every 28th hour. So keep this in mind as we talk today. Every 28th hour, there's a Black or brown body killed by law enforcement or someone in some type of law enforcement or vigilante. Every 28th hour. So,
Lord.
Yeah, you know what had me thinking, Teresita, when you were mentioning about, this is a privilege, if that's the right language even, that we get to see these. But, I was thinking about the COVID testing because we say, well, we have the statistics about how many people have died, how many people have tested positive. And if there were more testing, maybe the numbers would go higher. But, there's no test for police brutality. I mean, I think this is the disease that our society has, that we have no real way of holding people accountable. And I think that's what we're coming together to do, is to try to find ways, how can we keep our society and the police officers, but it's not just police officers, it's racism all the way around. And how do we address that? How do we find ways of evaluating when it's happening and what to do about it,
Right. And to also make the point that, it is racism, it's personal racism, and it's most definitely systemic racism that is the problem. But it's not just, and we need to make this clear, because all of us talk about this all the time, that the problem isn't white people. The problem is racist people. And that includes anyone that supports the system of racism and white supremacy, no matter what color, ethnicity, nationality, or religion they are. If you support the system of racism and white supremacy, you are part of the problem.
I would actually argue, Linda, that racism is the only way in which we are as a society ever together. That's it. That's our only actual bond, is that we are all part of a white supremacist system, right? And there are no individual acts of racism. Racism is like an aspen tree. It looks like it's a forest, but it's one tree with a bunch of shoots.
Go ahead, Jen.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that, yes, the problem is racism, but whiteness is a real issue.
Right.
And what that means. Linda and I was talking with Dr. Ngwa the other day, and he made this point how, white folks came to America and set up their own monarchy. So they were supposedly in monarchy, right? And then they came here and set up their own monarchy, and the monarchy is white folks are citizens, Black folks or people of color is subject.
Are not, right.
Well, and
that's the monarch. Just think about that for a minute. They set the standard of who's citizens and who are going to be subjects. And we see this happening because we are subjects. We've been subjects since we was deported from our own homeland in Africa and not human. And they think they can do whatever they want to our bodies and get away with it.
Right.
That's the issue.
Well, and theologically, I think it's really important that we name the misappropriation of the title Christian for so much of this, right? Like,
absolutely,
we have to grapple with the fact that the Puritanism, the Calvinism,
right,
is at the heart of almost all of these social ills, right? This idea of the elect is dangerous.
Yes.
And it comes from Paul, which is also dangerous because Paul's the only imperialist in the entire New Testament, right? Like, so
right.
If you're following Paul, you can't be following Jesus, right? Like,
absolutely.
Quickly.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I've made that point so many times, that when people want to oppress others by using the Bible, the very first thing, the two places they go to, Old Testament and Paul, they completely skip over Jesus, because following the Gospels, there is no oppression in that. It is only liberation. So when people want to oppress women, want to oppress people of color, they go to Ham for people of color. Oh, it's the curse of Ham. When they want to oppress women, they go to is it First Timothy and Paul from Paul? So it's always that, completely skipping over any teachings that Jesus gave us.
Yeah, and that's ours to dismantle, right? Like, politicians have to come up with better policies, but that we are all speaking this language of imperial exceptionalism and backing it up in these ways, that's the legacy that we have to dismantle.
Yes.
And I also want to go back to this notion of racism, this social construct of race, which is acted out in the systemicness of racism. Racism is both personal and systemic, right? So, and we saw that in the Ahmaud Arbery case.
Absolutely.
White men, a father and a son, deems this black body does not belong in this space and cannot jog in this space, cannot stop by a building that's not even constructed yet to look at it because he's jogging, so he might be stealing some wood or some light bulbs. I don't know what they think he does, whatever the excuse is, correct?
Right.
So that's, and then, you know, he winds up dead. The system then says they don't see no wrong, and they had the videotape. But it went into the pressure of the people seeing that videotape who put pressure on the system to finally get those men arrested after about 2 months.
Right.
That's how personal and systemic racism
work hand in hand,
and how white privilege protection works.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
In Central Park the other day, and I don't even want to call her name, she hasn't been arrested for a false accusation. And caught on video or caught on tape lying, and nobody has arrested her yet.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, you know, Jen, when you were talking just a second ago, I was thinking of that article that Rodney sent that we had looked at from Faith and Leadership, I think, at Duke. But you know, the thing that really caught me in that essay, it was an article, maybe the Boston Globe. I'll have to look it up and find out so we can make sure that I get it right. But the thing that really caught me there was he said he used the metaphor of the scene of the crime. And he said, since he's been trained as a theologian, he's looking for theological fingerprints. And I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think in some sense, I don't even feel comfortable calling myself a Christian anymore. And that's because Christianity itself is rooted in so much, Christianity in the West is rooted so much in supporting and uplifting the current hierarchy in a way that really keeps the kind of liberation that we're talking about out of the hands of the ordinary people.
Right.
And, so I think that that's important to name, you know.
Correct.
Absolutely.
I go back and forth between wanting to reclaim Christianity, but then again, Jesus never called himself a Christian. And having said that, I also, along those same lines, not only is the Old Testament and Paul, but it's also the polite, submissive version of Jesus that we serve. We choose theologically to ignore that Jesus systemically pushed against the establishment and what that meant for the disenfranchised and for those who were oppressed. And so it's also a call to call out specifically the white evangelicals who use Jesus as their metaphor for peace, when in truth, what they're using Jesus is an icon for submission and oppression. Yes. And so that is something that needs to be called out, that Jesus is being used as a metaphor to keep people quiet and silent and to keep people oppressed.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And so I thank God for my Drew education.
Absolutely.
Patrick Claiborne, who was the homiletics professor, and he taught a class on Howard Thurman, the spirituality of Howard Thurman. And I thank God for Thurman and his book, Jesus and the Disinherited.
Yeah.
Because in that book with Thurman talks about the religion of Jesus. And as I read Thurman, I rarely hear Thurman consider himself a Christian. Thurman is like, if there's any religion that I'm going to follow, it's going to be the religion of Jesus. And so it's not a religion that you want to talk about Jesus, but it is the religion of Jesus, right? So since then, I haven't identified as no Christian because I really don't even know what that even means anymore.
Right.
Christianity, I mean, the KKK say you have to be white and Christian to be a part of that organization.
Right.
So what is a Christian, right? So, but if I'm going to follow religion, it's going to be religion of Jesus. And you know, I lately I've found myself between Psalm 13 and how long, Lord, will you forget us forever? How long shall we take counsel in our souls, having sorrow in our hearts daily? How long will our enemies be exalted over us? And I've been reading that in plural communal language. Okay, I'm taking that authority to not make it personal, but to speak for the community. And then, so I find myself between Psalm 13 and Lamentations chapter 3, verse 64 through 66. Repay them, O Lord, according to the work of their hands. Give them a veiled heart. Your curse be upon them. In your anger, pursue and destroy them from under the heavens of the Lord. That's just where I find myself right now. Somewhere between how long we got to keep going through this, Lord, where black bodies are the only bodies always sacrificed to redeem the soul of America, to make America be who she says she is, and that is that all of us ought to have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And between that and, Lord, take my enemies out.
So
that's just where I find myself.
Rodney, I'm in a similar spot. I've been thinking. My conversation partners have been Samuel, who was a prophet and a politician, unabashedly both, and Bonhoeffer, who, you know, God bless him, but he twiddled his thumbs a little too long, and Jesus, who had the great timing and walked into the temple and was like, "It's over, friends," and when I'm asking myself how long, I'm registering more and more with every passing hour that the answer really is up to me, right? Like, this country is built on a rotten core. We can't fix it. We can't tweak it. We can only imagine something better, right? Think toward the kingdom, and then build that. And that's, again, that's ours to do, right? At what point do we need to be the revolutionaries? Which then gets us into pacifism and all of these other things, right? But what peace? This isn't peace. This is slow, soul-crushing decay.
Right.
And back to Christianity, the way it has been practiced and identifies with Western culture, colonialism, is the problem in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a Christianity that white evangelicals and missionaries have been pushing to give us a quote unquote heavenly salvation with no earthly liberation.
Absolutely.
That religion, I want no parts of it. I'm not buying that BS no more.
Absolutely.
Did both and.
It's right there in the Lord's Prayer.
You come follow me, I'll get you to heaven, but I'm gonna leave you stuck and leave the oppressor. The oppressor's gonna keep their foot on your neck the rest of your life. No.
Literally, their foot on your neck.
That religion that's gonna get me to heaven, but can't free me on earth, I want no more
parts of it. Absolutely.
You can keep that. You know why? Because it's useless.
Yeah, go ahead, Teresita.
No, you go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say there's this theologian, a Jewish theologian, Irving Greenberg, who said, I think he quoted somebody else saying it, became really important. After the Holocaust, he said that Jews no longer could consider the God of their covenant worth anything, and the covenant was ended. And because he said, I can't speak any philosophy or theology that cannot be said in the presence of burning children. And and so he said, even if God has abandoned our covenant, our desire to be in a place of liberation requires that we keep it. And that just for me is such a really good framework. Like the theology of the church, all of those other things that we've learned and studied about, they're worthless if we can be able to say something theologically or spiritually that does not take account of the black bodies that have been in our everyday lives, right? And so it's not just that police kill black men and black women, but it's that the roads in our cities have gone through and completely displaced people one time, another time, over and over. Red line communities, our school systems are failing, and it's because of racism. And so, I mean, it shapes everything about our world. So if we don't have a theology that can speak in the midst of that, then it's not worth me doing,
Right.
Absolutely, Michael.
And then I come back to this: how do we have a theology that speaks to this present moment that is not overtly revolutionary? Well,
it has to be. It has to be overtly revolutionary.
But then how do we put up, right? Like it's easy to preach a theology that's revolutionary in a lot of ways. But then at what point do we need to actually do the thing, right? We're squeamish about doing the thing. So we're offering up a hollow salvation too until we do the thing.
So I think it begs the question, what does the revolution look like? Because in looking at the news right now, the revolution is on. And it's just waiting for us as religious leaders to be part of what's already brewing. I saw lines of young white and black and brown young people pushing back courageously. And so I am absolutely, I know it's because they're fed up, and as long as us older people decide and choose to look the other way, they cannot see a future that involves and continues with the injustice, right? And so I heard, I've been reading posts from different people, and I think there was a denomination that came back and asked their pastors not to get involved in the protest. And so what does that look like? What does it look like for the theologian and the religious leader in the midst of the revolution brewing before our eyes to be the prophets, right? That signal to what God is doing in our midst, right? So the narrative continues to vilify protesters. The narrative continues to make them criminalize their actions when they're actually executing their civil rights.
Yes.
Right.
Bishop of Desert Southwest. That was the Methodist Bishop of Desert Southwest. It might have been other.
That was okay.
That too.
No. I think it was that. Yeah. So I was like, how as a religious leader, you ask your prophets not to be prophets in the public square. Right. I just think that's a huge.
But it's also the preaching of forgiveness and
without repentance.
Right, exactly. And that's
without the what? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Without repentance. We love to preach forgiveness. We love to go to the Lord's table every day or every month, but we don't talk about the importance of repentance that goes along with forgiveness.
Exactly. And, the church that I belong to, I couldn't even read her document. The pastor put out, this letter to the congregation, and I was like, great, initially, because she was saying, social justice is part of our Christian identity. And I was like, great, she gets it. But then she goes on and says, but God teaches us that we have to forgive our enemy. And that's when I stopped and shut it down. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? And some people on Facebook that I'm friends with are going to see this, what I'm saying right now, and I'm letting you know right now, I don't care. I don't. So if you want to run behind my back and send this to the pastor, feel free. Go ahead, because this is ridiculous what we are having to deal with. It is absolutely insane for anybody to think that it is okay for Black bodies to be lying in the street, bleeding, dying, bullets in their bodies, and we're just supposed to say, oh, we have to forgive our enemies. I'm sorry, but those people that are burning down Minneapolis, they're fed up. They're tired of it, and they don't have another outlet. And quite frankly, they don't follow what we're trying to teach anyway. They follow their.
Well, we don't have their trust.
Exactly.
Because we don't practice what we preach, right?
If the church keeps teaching that we're just supposed to pray and forgive, meanwhile we keep getting killed in the street, they're not following us.
Right.
They're following what their prophetic minds are telling them.
And their survival instinct too. I mean,
yes.
It boils down to survival. And so let's talk about that, right? What does it look like to walk in the world and knowing that you have a target on you, and that you don't know when it's coming? That it doesn't require you to commit an offense. It just requires you to walk in the God-given body, right? In your God-given body that is perceived as a threat. And so that speaks more volumes as to our collective sin than it does about whatever we want to make out of the victims making excuses. Oh, well, no, all these things are coming out about Mr. George Floyd, that, you know, that he had a criminal history, that it wasn't his first encounter with the law, that it was, for goodness sake, a forgery of a $20 bill. This is what this was all about. And the weaponizing of calling the police, right? And so that is, it boils down to that.
Did you hear the store owner? The store owner was like, he's in here all the time. He's a great guy. I don't even know that he knew that it was like
a counterfeit, right?
I just was trying to do the thing that I'm supposed to do to check the boxes. Oh my God. He kind of broke my heart, right? Like,
and do know this too, you know, while the film we see is with the knee on the neck, but there's another angle from other cameras where you see I think like two other cops with the knees on his leg, and the man was handcuffed.
Yes, behind his back.
You know what? And there's another part. I'm sick and tired of people talking about it's a broken system. No, it's not a broken system.
It's doing exactly what it was designed to do.
It's designed to do this, and it's working perfectly. You know, the FBI came out with a report in 2006 saying how white nationalist groups and white supremacist groups have encouraged their followers to infiltrate the military and the police departments. So they're training for the so-called racial war they think is about to break out. So I appreciate your report from the FBI, but the FBI didn't come back and say how they are weeding these people out.
Well, okay, so but then we're back to the same question, right? Like we're trying to sing Kumbaya and hug it out.
Right.
And stand in the middle of the street with a flower, you know, while the SWAT team comes in.
Right.
And I'm sorry, that makes us damn fools. Just damn fools. Because they will simply mow us down. Right?
You know, Jesus.
Then I find myself actually thinking I need to go get a pistol permit as a brown liberal pastor is insane. But I do.
I'm in the state of Indiana, and all I see is quite a bit of Confederate flags and pistol-toting people all the time. And I haven't got there yet, but I more about a gun to protect myself and my family than I am thinking about one now.
Right.
And you know what? Why should all the white nationalist people be the only ones that got weapons?
Right. And if we want gun control, if that's the goal,
you know what I'm saying?
Go get ourselves a gun.
Right.
You know, there's always, you know, back in the days, or there's always a buyback program in Black communities to get guns off the street. I have never heard about a buyback program in white communities.
Absolutely.
Their hands. Who are the ones with the most dangerous ones with guns anyway? And then you want to talk about, Linda was talking about forgiveness. And I know, Linda, you're not saying forgiveness doesn't come and that we should not forgive. But
absolutely.
Relationship between repentance and forgiveness.
Yes.
And America has never repented for the ideology of white superiority.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
got to start. In fact, Jesus said in Matthew, 43, 44, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Verse 44, but I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who despitefully use and persecute you. I didn't hear Jesus say forgive them nowhere.
Right. Yeah.
It don't say forgive in that verse right there. It don't say forgive nowhere when you're talking about your enemies. However, in chapter 6, because I'm gonna go there before other people who see this go there, in chapter 6, where Jesus starts talking about the model prayer, he does say forgive your debts as we forgive those of our debtors. I get that, but you know what? He ain't talking about enemies.
And as we
think he's talking about those that are followers of his, that we ought to forgive one another. Okay, so let's keep it in its correct context and stop talking about scripture or in the cavalier way that we think to make it fit for us.
Well, and also debtors suggest that there is some type of relationship, right?
Correct.
That there's a
correct.
You know, some type of transaction, right? Emotional or for what that matter, material. Sorry, Jen, I know you wanted to jump in.
Okay. It's debtors. It's debtors, not trespasses, right?
Right.
It is very, very. It's not a misdemeanor.
Right.
And so. It is a leveling, not a blind forgiving, right? Forgive as we forgive. We are both in this. And also then that follows with thy kingdom come.
That's right. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
There's right.
Yes.
Right. Same thing.
So
I
have to, I feel like I have to say this, to be honest. You know, I have been, most of the congregations I have served in have been white congregations. Many of them have been upper middle class white congregations. Some of them have been more rural congregations. And I've basically served in any different kind of white church that you can think of. I've not only served in white churches, but I have served in most of the different kinds. And I know what it's like. And I was, Teresita, you know, one of my mentors. I mean, he considered himself my mentor. But, you know, in these different congregations that I served, some of them I had white pastors, white male pastors, white men, coach me on how to identify where the line is so that you don't cross it in a way to upset the people in the pews. So there are ways that you can dance around issues so that you make people think that you're talking about it, but you don't upset.
Let's be honest, so that you can keep your job.
That's right. So you can keep your job. Exactly. And so I mean, and sometimes, if we're honest, I think sometimes it's because white pastors, white male pastors particularly, are not equipped. They're ill-equipped to talk about racism, for one, but then two, they're scared. It's not necessarily that they're timid. They don't even know that this is part of their responsibility. And, you know, so I'm really wrestling as a white male pastor in a denomination where I have the authority to talk to people. I have the privilege of being able to talk to pastors. And that's what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to find ways of letting them know and trying to equip them. This is part of the work you have to do now. And if you're not doing it now, then whatever happens in the future, you've been part of the problem, you know. And so it's just, that's where so much of this lies, is that even white people who consider themselves Christians go to churches, even in the most progressive churches, where white pastors are they just are afraid. They're afraid to talk about this. They're not equipped to talk about this. And so when it comes to who gets the power and who gets to speak, they can, you know, the people, and mostly there's small pockets of resistance in their congregations. Just not even the majority of the people.
We're now a consulting firm. You realize what you just did, Michael. We're now a consulting firm. So, friends, if you're not sure how to address this, you can call us. We will come. We will help you. You will pay us. It will be good.
Dr. King said that, I'm going to paraphrase, that the day going to come when we won't remember the words of our enemies, the silence of our friends.
Right.
And if I can have a conversation with King one day, I would tell him that if you're silent, you're not my friend.
Right.
Silent, you're not demonstrating love and justice. You know, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And your silence is actually complicit.
Absolutely.
Let me real quickly take a few minutes and put some framework, some historical framework around the Central Park issue with the black man Christian Cooper, and it's crazy that the lady's last name is Cooper as well, no relation. You know, but there's an article by Charles Blow who wrote how white women use themselves as instruments of terror. And in that article, he says that I am enraged by white women weaponizing racial anxiety, using their white femininity to activate systems of white terror against black men. This has long been a power white women realized they had and that they exerted. And so in 1921, there was the Tulsa Race Massacre.
Yes.
It was the weekend, watch this. It was Memorial Day weekend. We just celebrated it, right? So, you know, a lot of people, and I don't want to diminish Memorial Day weekend and by not really thinking about our troops. I so heartily thank our troops for what they have done,
right,
for a level of freedom in this country. But when I think of Memorial Day weekend, I think of the Tulsa Race Massacre, where a white woman was in an elevator with a young black man and then lied about him saying something to her or whatever happened. He was arrested, taken to jail. Mobsters wanted to take him out of prison or out of jail and go lynch him like they normally do.
Right.
There were black people there who protected him that night. And I think there was a struggle over a gun. Maybe one of the white dudes got shot or something like that. And they went back and got their white mob, went in there, and from May 31st to June 1st, destroyed Black Wall Street. And so because of a white woman's lie,
right,
1955, another white woman's lie that got Emmett Till lynched.
Exactly.
Which started the civil rights movement. And thank God for Mamie Elizabeth Till Mobley, who would not allow her son's casket to be closed. Expose right. America to who she really is.
Absolutely.
And how they've been treating Black bodies. And so, and again, this woman tells the truth on her deathbed of how she lied. And so when you get a white woman in Central Park on camera telling this gentleman to put, hey, don't film me. All he wants you to do is put your dog on a leash.
Right.
And he's, if you don't put your camera, don't film me, I'm gonna call the cops. Call the cops, tell them all you want. Well, I'm gonna call the cops and tell them that I'm being attacked by a black man. Tell them whatever you want to tell them. So this is dangerous. This is
Absolutely.
how we got lynched and killed in our history because of lies of white women.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you know, I'm in a very white congregation, so you know, I have made a lot of white women very, very uncomfortable this week because they don't want to see the Amy Cooper in themselves.
Right. Right. And people like to always think that because they don't participate in the macro aggressions that of personal and systemic racism, they don't identify the ways in which they participate in the microaggressions and in the ways that silence is deadly, lying is deadly.
Right.
You know, calling someone for you know, calling the police, I should say, for minor things can cause us to be killed.
And if not for videotaping and recordings, who knows what would have happened to Christian Cooper in New York City with a white woman calling the police on a black
Central Park. Yeah.
Let's act like, New York City has its issues, Doc. It ain't like Malcolm X said, this ain't just no Southern problem.
Oh, absolutely.
A Western and an Eastern problem as well.
Absolutely.
And the white savior complex has come out so, like, it's ridiculous this week, right? Like, I'm not part of the problem. I've tried to help.
Right. I have a black friend. Right. That oh my God, I'm so tired of that. But not only that, I need to say this because my daughter complained. She's 17. She just graduated high school. I can't tell you the number of times she has come to me and complained about her friends and their use of the word nigger. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. And using, and these are white girls, boys, whoever, who claim to be her friend and use the word, but then excuse it by saying, oh, I don't mean it in the bad way. I mean it like, because you're my friend. You're my nigga.
I mean it with an A, not an ER.
Yes, exactly.
It doesn't matter.
Exactly. And they think that excuses it. So they'll call somebody a nigger in one breath and say Black Lives Matter in another. And that is part of the problem as well. Because young people, some of them get it, but so many of them do not.
What is it? 47% of millennials, which automatically means white. Let's be honest, right? Like, I don't understand. There's what black
as a culture, yeah.
We're not. No, it's not about black people. Anyway, 47% of millennials think that we talk about race too much, and that I think it's 48%, as if it matters. That's a big difference. Think that minorities get too many benefits.
Privileges? What is it?
Benefits?
Right.
We have the privilege of living in the ghetto. We have the privilege of being undereducated. We have the awesome privilege of being underemployed. We have the privilege of not getting properly tested during this COVID-19 pandemic. What other privileges should we name?
You get the privilege of working for Amazon and delivering everybody's groceries, right? You get the privilege of being the person that has to go to people's homes to lay food down on their doorsteps. You get the privilege of, yeah, exactly.
And also we have the right to remain silent at the risk of speaking up and getting killed.
Right.
So, we have mentioned, and I need to address this because we have mentioned across the board, that our, white people have, difficult time having this conversation. And I just want to put this out there as a consultant. If you are having a hard time having this conversation and makes you uncomfortable, then check with yourself, because usually we don't have to want to have the conversation because we're so focused on being right, and we can't stand being corrected by a person of color. It speaks of your white fragility, that you are more invested in coming across as, but I'm not racist, than actually listening to the stories and standing with those whom actually need you to be an ally in this. Because let's talk this straight. I can go out there and get a gun, but let's not forget Philando Castile, who rightfully was had his gun.
Yes.
And still got him killed. So, which means I can go and get lawfully a weapon, but that doesn't mean that as a brown person, I can walk around in the world the same way as a white person who has lawfully owns a gun.
Right.
That's the bottom line, right?
But the next step, have the gun. Who do you have the gun with? Right. And that's my gun is not a revolution.
Right.
Our guns are at a bare minimum a stopgap against white supremacist mobs running roughshod without even a speed bump to mow us down, right? Like,
yeah, for sure, yeah.
And you know, if people think we talk about race too much, well, I challenge them to challenge the system to take race off of every application that we got to fill out.
Absolutely.
Whether it's on an application for a job, whether it's on the census, I mean, every time you turn around, the question of race is on some type of form you got to fill out. So
and some of us can't check boxes.
Say again.
And some of us don't have a box to check.
Right, exactly, right. And so if we talk about it too much, then the only reason why we really talk about race, because it's only card in the deck. Put some other card in the deck, and then I won't keep pulling the race card.
And it's not even, I hate that term. And I know you don't mean it that way, Rodney. Pulling the race card. No, okay. This country constructed the ideology of race.
Correct.
So you're the ones that started the race card.
Correct.
We are not pulling anything. We are what's the word? We're discussing and we're bringing it to the forefront of the issue that you created, the construct that you created, and we're just making you aware of the problems of it, the problems with it. So how are we pulling anything? People just want us to take, that's the problem. People want this country, the superior people want to do whatever they want to do to us. They want to construct whatever that narrative they want to about us, and they expect us to sit silently and take it.
I think, Linda, you hit it in the nail. I think narrative is important. I mean, narrative drives everything. I read yesterday another news article about Mr. Floyd and saying that the coroner or whoever does the autopsy came back and said he actually didn't die of asphyxia, but rather he had underlying ailments that may have provoked his death in addition to potential intoxicants.
Are you kidding?
So no. And so I am, that's the narrative, right? That's the power of racism, being able to tell its own story. So that we are like all of a sudden crazy. All of a sudden we didn't see him die with his face to the pavement, right? All of a sudden we imagine that collectively. So the narrative is powerful, and I think that's where our voices come into play as religious leaders. We can choose to see Jesus tortured to death on the cross as a necessary evil for our own salvation, or we can simply look at his tortured body and say, we did this. Yeah. And I chose to do the latter.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Friends, I know that we're getting ready to wrap things up, but I wanted to just quickly, before we quit, if you all have specific resources that you can name, because I'm sure that all five of us have a book or have a resource that we can name that other people can read. But I wanted to just lift up, there's a really good book that was designed for young people, written by Ibrahim what's his last name? Bindi, right? And Kendi, Abraham X. Kendi. But anyway, so Jason Reynolds, who is who writes books for young Black children, he remixed it, and so the book is called Stamped, and it tells the history of American racism in America, and it has his whole framework is there are separationists or segregationists, there are assimilationists, and then there are anti-racists. And so I would just charge anybody to read that book, not only to understand his framework, but to get a better sense of how we ended up this way.
Good. Thank you, Michael.
Go
ahead, Rodney.
Okay. I just want to say two quick things that, when I was back at Drew, and Trayvon Martin was assassinated or lynched, modern day. It came a time when, in that moment, I had 3 young boys. I started thinking about them. And Dr. Ingwa was having a conversation. And it came up in that conversation that, when I look at my boys, I used to say, I wonder what they're going to be when they grow up. But that shifted to what will they be if they grow up?
Yes.
And it shouldn't be that way, America.
Right.
Absolutely.
You know, we belong here just as much as anybody else. And we just want this country to love us as much as we love it. And the book that I would offer is by Jamar Tisby, and it is The Color of Compromise, the truth about the American church's complicity in racism. Thanks for holding that up, Jen, because I was about to do the same thing. and he lays it on how complicit Christianity is in upholding this racist structure, this westernized, Europeanized, and Americanized Christianity, by the way. And he challenges early in the book, I think the first chapter, he challenges Christians to move from a complicit Christianity to a courageous Christianity. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
I want to lift up tomorrow's scripture, Acts 2, the day of Pentecost, and I want to encourage everybody to read that through the lens of everything that's happening right now. And I mean, if you don't see the propheticness of it, if that's even a word, then some lenses need to be cleared. And I also want to offer the book White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism by Robin DiAngelo. There you go.
She got the
Thank
whole...
you, Vanna. I think that resource is invaluable.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Agreed.
And I don't have my books here, but Jen, I love it because every book we named, I have also, but they're in my living room. But
this is just what's next to me.
Right.
Linda,
I know.
I got one for you, Linda. I got one for you. Me and Linda just got this book the other day.
Yes, hold it up.
So I'm going to hold up Ruah Benjamin, Race After Technology. She is a professor at Princeton. And stay tuned, all, because you're gonna. I think we all gonna have this one day.
Yes, and just so you know, Jen, Michael, and Teresita, we're going to be talking to you all about that book offline. So be prepared to purchase it, but we'll tell you why offline. But that book is one that talks about ways to use technology in the fight for social justice. And that's one that Dr. Ngwa recommended to Rodney and I.
And by the way, the subtitle of the book is, so here it is, Race After Technology, Abolitionist Tools for the New Jim Code.
Yes. Yep.
So Jen, you want to offer up something?
We don't.
You had everybody's book. You use our Vanna White for a moment.
I actually think that one of the most important things we can offer up is anti-racist writing by white people for white people, right? Like, if we're going to say do the work yourself, then we have to offer up resources where people have done the work, right? Like, you're not a pioneer, friend. You're just joining the chorus. So
and Michael, you're doing something like that now.
There's another resource, how to be an anti-racist.
Ibrahim.
Who's the author of that, Michael?
Ibrahim X. Kendi. It's the same guy in the other book called Stamped. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Right.
Those two, by the way, are in my church office, so I can't stand this.
Yeah, and we all collectively know a book that fits right what Jen said just now, which was Jennifer Harvey's book, Dear White Christians.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yep.
And let me just make one more, and then we'll cut it there, I guess. One more suggestion: The Politics of Jesus by Aubrey Hendricks.
Aubrey Hendricks.
Yes, that book is awesome.
Important book.
So, final words? Or
new friends, do your reading. Ask us questions. We are here to help. That's what it means to be a public theologian.
Absolutely. And You'll be hearing more from us next time. We will try to go live so that we can get questions real time. And
Let me say this.
Help reach out to each other and help each other to get through this spiritually, but also dig deep within yourself to see what ways in which you may be contributing to racist ideology.
And I just want to say this. My dear brothers and sisters who are Black, white, Latinx, Asian, and any other ethnicity, it is the neshama which connects all humanity together. That breath of life God has breathed in us. What makes us different? It's the breath of God, the neshama that connects us all as human beings. Let's lock arms.
Yes.
And fight for a just and equitable society God will be proud of.
Y'all go forth and conspire.
Yes. Yes. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we'll be talking soon.
Peace.
Peace.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.